Hello and welcome to Cleveland Classic Cinema. Tonight's movie is 1955's It Came From Beneath the Sea, directed by Robert Gordon.
A tidal wave of terror engulfs the screen as a raging monster from the dawn of creation attacks the world of man.
Here, gentlemen, is your villain.
It would take an enormous number of those to disable a Navy submarine.
Or just one of enormous size, Mr. Chase.
I see they picked an atom sub to go out and fight this thing. Why is that, Commander?
Could be because of the new electronic equipment, or her speed.
Was she ordered back here from Hawaii just for that?
That's right. Think it's as bad as that, do you? I think we're lucky she's here.
The H-bomb blasted it loose from the depths of the Pacific. But not even the H-bomb can kill it.
Unknown object coming this way. Entering minefield. Stand by, number 38, mine.
Fire!
Go up. Ready, number 12, south.
Fire!
Coming on through.
That's the end of our first line of defense, Miss Joyce.
Then the red alert.
West Coast reels under Holocaust as the men and weapons of the atomic age battle to the death against the ageless monster of the deep.
In the 1950s, many science fiction movies were shot in a semi-documentary style in imitation of the film noirs of the time. In 1954, Warner Brothers released Them, a film about giant mutated, by radioactivity of course, ants. It was shot in a semi-documentary style, was an excellent film and made a ton of money, so of course it was followed by a ton of movies that featured giant creatures menacing the world, or at least the United States. A lot of them were shot in pseudo-semi-documentary style in imitation of them, but most of them were, well, crap. There was The Deadly Madness, Beginning of the End, Earth versus the Spider, The Giant Claw. The end is listless, as they say. Most of these dogs were made by Mr. Big himself, Bert I. Gordon, but a good portion of them were committed by other studios and directors. You also had tons of movies featuring revived dinosaurs, usually revived by atom bomb testing and therefore becoming radioactive themselves. Some of these movies were actually good movies, like the original Godzilla, not the version released in the US, but the Japanese version, Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, Gorgo, and The Monster That Challenged the World. The best of the giant monster movies, however, invariably featured the stop-motion special effects of the master, Ray Harryhausen. Briefly, Harryhausen saw King Kong when he was 13 years old and found his path in life early. He found out as much about stop-motion animation as he could and began making films soon after, eventually getting in touch with Willis O'Brien, who eventually took him on as an apprentice. His first professional work was on George Pal's Puppetoon series, and after that he worked with his idol O'Brien. He ended up doing the bulk of the animation on Mighty Joe Young and then moved out on his own, creating the Rhedosaurus for the film The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms for Warner Brothers. The $200,000 budget on the film forced him to improvise to get the animation in the same frame as the live action, and he learned split screening to achieve the result he wanted. Unfortunately, as excellent as his work in that movie was, the quality of his work on that low a budget convinced producers that the incredibly labor-intensive work he did could be done on a low budget, and he rarely got as much money for his effects as he should have. Things improved slightly when he hooked up with producer Charles Schneer, with whom he made many of his greatest movies, such as 1958's The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad and 1963's Jason and the Argonauts. In 1992, he was finally honored by the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences with a well-deserved honorary Lifetime Achievement Oscar. His work touched and inspired everyone who saw it, and he received accolades from George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, John Landis, Phil Tippett, and Dennis Muren, among many, many others. I had the incredible honor of meeting Ray Harryhausen and shaking his hand when he appeared at the Cleveland Cinematheque. I'll never forget that. Anyway, the monster in this film is allegedly a giant octopus, but it is, in fact, a sexopus. You wouldn't notice this if I didn't tell you, but the giant octopus in this film only has 6 tentacles due to budgetary restrictions. It would have taken more time and a lot more labor to animate 8 tentacles as opposed to only 6. It doesn't make a bit of difference. You never notice the missing tentacles anyway. You know, I myself always assumed they were just under the water. Harryhausen's work here is, as usual, excellent. The compositing of the stop animated octopus in the live action is pretty much flawless, at least for its time. Audiences spoiled by CGI may find it rather crude, but I admire it more than the CGI nonetheless. The animation in this film is hand manipulated. You know, this may be off subject, but it's something I need to say. While CG is an amazing advancement in the creation of motion pictures, it's still lacking something. It does allow filmmakers to achieve amazing things, but when it comes to the show, when it becomes the show instead of the tool, I don't like it. Understand that I'm not saying that it's akin to cheating or anything. Digital effects are just as difficult to achieve realistically as any other effect, but physical effects will always win out over CG, at least in my opinion. Speaking with what little experience I have as an actor, when you can interact with an actual physical object, it improves your performance. In addition to that, it just looks better on screen. Conversely, I love stop animation. To me, it always had a kind of bizarre reality when done correctly, and a large part of the believability came from a realistic interaction between the actor and the miniature. The interactions in this and other Harryhausen movies were achieved by Harryhausen himself holding a long stick with a tennis ball on the end so as to guide the eye line of the actors. He himself directed these scenes where there was interaction between live actors and stop animated figures because he alone knew how everything was going to look in the final composite. I mean, you can't have Talos come around the cliffs and everybody staring at his knees, right? Something I'd really have loved to see would be Harryhausen animated models composited with live action via CGI. Now that would have been something. It Came from Beneath the Sea deals with a giant octopus whose feeding habits have been changed due to radiation from H-bomb tests. It seems that the creature has been irradiated, and fish supposedly have built-in Geiger counters that alert them when something radioactive is around so they're able to avoid being eaten by said octopi. This is, of course, complete nonsense, but it gets the story going, so I'll give it a pass. Now, since humans don't have this ability to sense radioactivity, the octopus naturally starts eating them instead. This logic fades quite a bit when you hold the light up to it, but for the purposes of this story, I'll give that a pass as well. The octopus starts by attacking a submarine, but the sub, after a bit of a struggle, manages to get free and surface. No one could figure out just what attacked the sub, but pretty soon the giant octopus attacks a merchant vessel and takes it down in a typically excellent Harryhausen attack, then starts sinking other ships on its way to San Francisco. A few sailors manage to survive one attack, but when they come back to shore and start talking about sea monsters, everyone thinks they're nuts, so they clam up. The Navy calls in a couple of scientists, and as always in 50 science fiction movies, one is male and one is female, who eventually figure out just what is going on. In another plot point typical of 1950s sci-fi movies, the beautiful female scientist, who's being pursued by the macho military man, is secretly attracted to the noble male scientist, although the male scientist doesn't seem to notice. This is something that happens in just about every single science fiction movie of the 50s, and the military guy inevitably gets the girl at the end. I'm surprised male scientists ever managed to have offspring. The female scientist, however, is a new breed of woman. None of that raising kids, doing housework, clipping coupon stuff for her. She's smart, independent, tough as nails, and happy in her work. Although she gets a bit hot under the collar when the government men question her conclusions, it's understandable. When Commander Matthews suggested she sit this thing out and let the Navy handle it, however, her partner in research, Dr. John Carter, asks what she says about that. Matthews replies, "What's the difference what she says?" Ooh. While I know a good number of women who would go absolutely ballistic if a man said that in front of them, we have to remember that this is the 1950s after all. Carter, who's more enlightened than Matthews, replies that there's a whole new breed who feel that they're just as smart and just as courageous as men. And they are. They don't like to be overprotected, and they don't like to have their initiative taken away from them. Be that as it may, she still screams when she sees the octopus for the first time, but that's to be expected since you have to have the heroine in a horror movie scream at least once. She does stand up to Matthews, however, and doesn't do it in a bitchy manner. She's calm, she's erudite, and she makes a good argument. Matthews, to his credit, accepts the rebuke and treats her with the respect she deserves from then on. As enlightened as Carter is, however, he seems to be completely blind to the fact that Professor Joyce seems to have a bit of a crush on him. I suppose there's only so much room in a man's brain after all. I mean, I myself just about have to be hit over the head with a club before I'll notice or believe that a woman is interested in me for more than my charming personality, so I feel an affinity with Carter. That doesn't mean that Professor Joyce is above using her feminine wiles when necessary, though. When the sailors clam up about what really attacked the ship, she uses her looks to get one of them to come clean. It would seem not all men are that stupid when it comes to recognizing a woman's interest, even if it's phony. Speaking of the scientists, they have the usual problems convincing the pig-headed government officials of the reality of the giant octopus until they actually sight and get photos of it. Once they are convinced, however, they throw their full might into the battle. What no one seems to consider is that the poor thing's just trying to find something to eat. Too bad it didn't attack New Jersey. Interestingly, the submarine shots were photographed on an actual sub in Long Beach, California. While the lighting in the sub scenes isn't too good, probably owing to the fact that there wasn't any room to set lights in the thing artistically, the shots have a real authenticity to them. They definitely get across the idea of how claustrophobic the quarters on a sub are, although Matthews and Griff, his second in command, comment on how roomy it is. The old subs must have been a nightmare. The scenes of the octopus attack are, as to be expected, excellent. The attack on the ship, the model of which, incidentally, Harryhausen bought at a 5 and dime. The attack on the Golden Gate Bridge. The city of San Francisco refused to cooperate with the film crew, fearing it would undermine confidence in the span, so the film crew had to steal shots of the bridge from a parked truck. The attack on San Francisco. All of them are just terrific and show off the talents of the animator beautifully. It's kind of an unwritten rule that famous landmarks have to be destroyed by giant monsters, and some movies do it better than others. You see the Golden Gate Bridge get torn up in this movie, the Capitol and the Washington Monument get busted up in Earth versus the Flying Saucers, and just about every famous landmark in the U.S. gets destroyed in Independence Day. They use miniatures in that movie, by the way. The best effects are still practical effects. On to the bios. Jesse Kenneth Tobey was born on March 23, 1917 in Oakland, California. He was studying law at the University of California when he got his first taste of acting in the little theater productions at the school. Enjoying the experience, he studied for a year and a half at New York's neighborhood playhouse along with fellow students Gregory Peck, Eli Wallach, and Tony Randall. During the 1940s, he appeared in stock and Broadway productions, making his first film appearance in a 1943 short entitled The Man on the Ferry, and went on to appear in an amazing 214 movies and television series, including a great cameo appearance in Joe Dante's underrated 1987 film Inner Space. His last film was 2005's The Naked Monster. Kenneth Tobey died of natural causes on December 22, 2002, in Rancho Mirage, California. Slow-eyed beauty Faith Marie Domer was born on June 16, 1924 in New Orleans, Louisiana. Adopted at the age of 6 weeks, her family moved with her to California in 1927. She was raised Catholic and had her first stage experience while still in school. After graduation, she was involved in a serious car accident and went through the windshield, spending the next 18 months undergoing major reconstructive surgery. After a brief marriage while still in her teens, she was discovered by a Warner Brothers talent scout in 1941, and soon after attended a studio party on millionaire Howard Hughes' yacht. Infatuated with the young beauty, Hughes bought out her contract for $50,000 and signed her to RKO, the movie studio he owned at the time. After buying her parents a house to mollify them as he was dating their 15-year-old daughter, he paid for diction and acting lessons for young Faith. The affair ended in 1943 when she discovered Hughes was enjoying the company of Lana Turner, Ava Gardner, and Rita Hayworth in addition to her. To be young, rich, and borderline psychotic in the 40s. Her first film role was a walk-on, or should I say a dance-on, in 1941's Blues of the Night as a jitterbugger, followed by uncredited roles in the same year's short Dancing in a Harem, followed by a role in 1946's Young Widow. Her first real starring role was in 1950's film noir Where Danger Lives, followed by the same year's Vendetta, a troubled production that went through 4 directors before being released and sinking from sight rather quickly. After these failures, Hughes lost interest in Miss Domer and she went freelance, appearing mostly in westerns before landing the role she's probably best remembered for, that of Dr. Ruth Adams in 1955's This Island Earth. She also appeared as the Cobra Woman in the same year's Cult of the Cobra. After making 3 films in England, she returned to the United States and concentrated on television appearances, then made several films in Italy before retiring from the screen in the 1970s. Faith Domer died of cancer on April 4, 1999 in Santa Barbara, California. I really enjoyed It Came From Beneath the Sea, but you have to temper that opinion with the knowledge that I love movies that feature effects done by Ray Harryhausen. Hopefully someday I'll be able to show The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad or Jason and the Argonauts, a couple of his best films. The man was a special effects artist of the highest order, and as I mentioned before, was an inspiration to many directors and effects people in Hollywood today. All right, enough with the gushing. It's time to sit back, relax, and enjoy It Came From Beneath the Sea, right here on Cleveland Classic Cinema.